going to get started with the next panel, a hard act to follow, but it's going to be very, very good. It's an important topic. It's in the news almost every day. And power generation in Latin America is a critical area. And the ability to produce this work is very good. So I don't have anything other to say except to introduce your moderator, Rafael de los Santos of Trotalosa, who I personally have been associated with the last 15 years. And he has a panel of experts who are going to really enlighten us on the subject. So Rafael, you're up.
Thank you, John. Well, yes, you're right. It's a tough event to go after Mr. John, but after John Amos, that John. So here with me, I have three gentlemen that are experts in the field. Here to my left, I have Ignacio Benedetti. He leads the South America office in Colombia, Peru, Chile, Bolivia for UTC Overseas. He has built UTC during 2 decades of presence in Latin America with project cargo experience. Ignacio has been responsible for successful execution of numerous energy and industrial projects, offering solutions on specialized transport, cargo, and custom fiscal benefits. Welcome, Ignacio. To his left, let me introduce Luis Carvajal. He is a mechanical engineer from the UFPS, University of Colombia. He holds a master's in ISO 2001 and an MBA. He has experience on transportation for a period of about 32 years. He must be 48, so he started very early. So I have worked, and he has worked in Mammoth for 24 years on various positions as an engineer, supervisor, operations manager, sales manager, general manager in Mammoth, Venezuela. And since 2010, he's the general manager of Mammoth, Colombia, and a sales manager for LATAM countries, including Central America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Luis.
Thank you, sir.
And finally, Miguel Perez, my good friend Miguel Perez. He is SAPCO CEO. SAPCO is the leading company on powertrain installation of power plants in Mexico. And SAPCO has installed about 21% of the equivalent of the peak demand in Mexico. Welcome, Miguel.
Hi, thank you very much.
Welcome, gentlemen. So we're going to start with you, Ignacio.
Thanks.
The presentation should be right there, and go ahead.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to participate on this panel with such great colleagues. I will start discussing some of the opportunities and challenges on the energy transition in Latin America. But first, let's start with some context on the road to net zero. On the road to net zero. Every Latin American country has ratified the Paris Agreement and made commitment to reaching net zero emissions by 2050, bringing with it sustainable practices and a rapid deployment for clean energy, transforming the region into a solution for climate change. Energy generation and transportation are the main sources of CO2 emissions worldwide, accounting for close to 3/4 of all greenhouse emissions. As a result, there's a shift in electricity generation, moving from fossil fuels to renewable energies in order to decarbonize electricity. Latin America and the world are making a rapid transition to low-carbon technologies such as wind turbines, solar panels, and battery storage. Based on net zero scenarios, the International Agency projects that before 2030, solar power will become the leading global source of electricity, increasing the share of renewable sources from 29% in 2020 to nearly 60% in 2030 and over 90% by 2050. So massive investments in solar and wind power will follow to reach goal of 23,000 terawatt hours by 2050. The starting point shows Latin America as one of the cleanest energy networks in the world, with levels over 60% of power generation coming from renewables. This is characterized by a high dependence on hydropower and a growing presence of new wind and solar generation. Exploiting the complementarity of hydropower and variable renewable sources is a key leveraging factor for all renewables in Latin America. By 2040, electricity consumption is expected to increase by 45% of current levels, an average rate of 2% per year, driven by expanding population, rising incomes, and living standards. To satisfy demand, new installed capacity of solar power and wind is expected to reach 325 gigawatts by 2050, nearly a five-fold of current levels. In addition, investments in battery storage systems are needed in order to improve the flexibility of power system and maintain electricity security. According to Bloomberg New Energy Outlook 2020, forecast indicates that total investment in new energy capacity in Latin America will reach over $450 billion by 2050. As a result, Latin America is experiencing an investment boom in the power sector. Based on BNA America's CAPEX publication, 20 of the largest power companies with presence in the region have projected US $57 billion in combined capital investments in 2022, up from $48.21 billion from 2021. Multi-year global plans of these companies show growth in investment and deployment, mostly dedicated to clean electricity generation, network infrastructure, end-use sectors, and hydrogen production. One of the region's greatest challenges for renewable generation is connecting those alternative energies to the power grid, since most solar and wind projects are usually in remote locations. It is estimated that by 2025, the top 6 countries in Latin America will have to invest nearly $20 billion in transmission lines to support their growing generation capacity. But delivering this energy transition, at the needed pace and scale, will require substantial amounts of critical minerals that are essential components to clean energy technologies, from wind turbines to electricity networks and electric vehicles. Their supply becomes a significant growth area. A study by the International Energy Agency precisely was prepared to evaluate how fast could demand of these minerals grow. And the response is, to reach net zero by 2050, it will require 6 times the current level of mineral production. The main factor is the explosive growth in demand for electronic vehicles and battery storage, followed by expanding electricity networks. So what are those critical minerals needed for the clean energy technology? Based on the main demand, growth is projected in the following areas. Minerals are needed for electronic vehicles are lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, and graphite, which are crucial to battery performance, longevity, and energy density. Electricity networks require huge amounts of copper and aluminum, with copper being the cornerstone of all electricity technologies. So how will the world meet the high mineral demand to build a future of renewable energy? And the answer lies in the mineral-rich countries of Latin America. Chile and Peru are already the world's #1 and #2 copper producers, controlling almost 40% of the world's supply. Their massive reserves, first and third in the world, means they will play a key role in the clean energy transition. Mexico, with the world's 5th largest copper reserves, also deserves a mention. The lithium triangle of Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina contain more than 50% of the world's reserves of lithium, which is vital for batteries needed to store electric power. Brazil has the world's 3rd largest supply of nickel, which is another key battery metal. So clearly, Latin America has a strong position on the road to becoming a key supplier for the energy transition and experience significant investment growth in the future decades. But there are some challenges. The first challenge is lead times. Based on recent mining projects, average lead time from discovery to production is around 8 years for lithium and 16 years for a copper mine. The last 10 years have seen a chronic underinvestment in the near to medium term that will result in a supply deficit. Immediate action is needed in Latin America to ensure supply, as demand for these minerals may appear faster than the lead time from discovery to production. The second challenge is water management. Copper and lithium mining are water intensive, and mines in South America are exposed to high levels of climate and water stress. Companies need to invest in desalination capabilities to use seawater. It is expected that 15 new desalination plants or seawater impulsion systems are expected to come online by 2028. The third challenge in Latin America is politics. I'm not talking about the left-wing governments currently in power, despite their desire to increase taxes on miners. The biggest problem is local politics, managing relationships with local stakeholders to obtain their social license to operate. New mining projects are often opposed by local communities in remote areas and struggle with the execution. Ironically, the same environmental consciousness that is pushing electrification also turns public opinion against mining. The market focuses on clean technology solutions, such as batteries and electric vehicles, but the real bottleneck is metals supply. Latin America needs to step up to the challenge and become part of the global solution, being the supplier of choice to provide the critical minerals and metals needed for the world's clean energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Nacho. I found it very, very interesting and a lot of information that you have shared with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Luis, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Muy bien, eh?
Hi, hello. Good morning or good afternoon? We're in the middle. I see some friends from Latin America. That's good. And this is a nice opportunity to practice Spanish if you want. Okay, but let's talk about Latin America. As you know, this is, let me put the baby star here. Yes. Okay, we are going to talk about wind, offshore wind and onshore wind. This is the two systems that we are now working in Latam. It's the boom for the moment. So we can discuss about the capacity of wind energy stored in Latin America. Right now, we have about 52 gigawatts stored. And you see in the graph, 2022 is an exceptional year because the pandemic and the crisis of the shipping moved the project from the last year to 22. Supposed to, Latam will be grow per about 5 or 4 gigawatts per year. However, we have 5 or 6 gigawatts per year. We are reach about 10% of the increase. And we want to remark that the global average is about 6%. So we are in a good position for the next coming years. We see the total market distribution. We are talking about the same 52 gigawatts in Latin America. But it's interesting to remark that Brazil has more or less 42% of the total installations because they started several years ago with this kind of projects. And the second position, Mexico, has about 8. This is also a nice position in Latin America. And if we combine Uruguay, Argentina, and Chile as a south part of Latin America, we are talking about 16% of the total market distribution. And the rest of the countries from Bolivia to Central America, even Caribbean countries, we are somewhere about 27% of the installations. But this is the current situation in Latin America. So we want to talk about the challenges for onshore. The challenges that we are facing now is for sure there are not many cranes available in Latin America. This is one of the main issues that we are facing now. Large cranes, we are talking about 600-ton cranes, 750-ton cranes, or even more. And they are a special crane because the track of the cranes are narrow tracks. So there are not many cranes available over there. But this is one of the challenges that we are facing that I mentioned in Latin America. Another challenge is for sure the lack infrastructure for roads. Also, we have problems like the billboards, walking bridges, and tunnels. So this is one of the main issues that we have in road transportations. Even we have to cross the mountains or hills and cross the towns and use a special device to haul this kind of the items. They are not heavy, but they are oversized. So this is one of the more problems that we have. So I want to share with you this graphic, but this is very interesting to see the evolutions of the wind turbine generator throughout the years and centuries. But we want to remark 2005 and 10 that the wind turbine generator reached about 4 or 7 megawatts capacity. And after 7, you can see that the big turbines over 200 meter height and the megabytes can reach 18 megawatts. This is big machines. So if we are talking about onshore and offshore, we can put a limit on the 7. So below 7 will be in onshore, and more than 7, you can see the big machines for offshore. But this is something that I want to remark because Latin America will have nice new projects coming for the next year, that for sure offshore. So we'll be interested to show the challenges for offshore. This is another picture. It's not by road, basically by ships in the ports, and the cargo coming in the ports and go out of the ports. And this is a heavy items to move in the ports. This is special logistics. The potential that we have in Latam is one of them is Colombia. And you see the scale of the colors from blue to red. The red means that the wind speed is over 10 meters per second. This is high speed. But Colombia has about 10. You see the red color in the north part of Colombia. And this is over the average of the average worldwide. So this is nice position that Colombia has for this project. The potential will be about 50 gigawatts, and the speed is high speed. And right now, we are talking about 6 gigawatts to install in the next 8 years. Brazil is also a nice opportunity for Latin America. You see the red zone is also a nice potential area for this kind of projects offshore. But in Caribbean or in Latin America waters, we can see that the shallow water, not shallow water, but the deep of the water will be more or less between 0 and 60 meters deep. So that means that we can use monopiles and jackets. The rest of the systems are for the deep waters when we are talking about floating systems. But Latin America will be used more or less pilots and jackets. The challenges, for sure, at the beginning, we are talking about rules, laws, regulations, permits, and this is the main challenge that we are now facing in Latin America for this kind of projects. And also heavy items to move in the ports, like nacelles per about 400 tons or 500 tons, the monopiles. This is interesting issue. We are talking about 1,400 tons each one. The transition, this is one of the another biggest piece on these systems, and chips. Also the challenge is why chips? Because it's not all companies has to capabilities to move the big items like this. But this is one of the challenges that you have. And one more, for sure, will be used cranes, large cranes for about 2,000 or 5,000 tons capacity in order to move the big jackets on the ports. And this is one of the problems that we have. At the end, and no less, ports. The ports in Latin America doesn't have good spaces, doesn't have a good capacity in the docks to allow these cargoes. Basically, one of the, again, main challenge in Latin America is to improve the ports, to invest on the ports. As you see the picture, the space are big spaces, and it's the case of the jackets. And we're talking about that the new ports need about 20 hectares for 100 wind turbines, more or less. And the dock capacity can be reached at 20 tons per square meter. The water drop is not too big issue, but can be between 8 and 10 meters. That's enough for the moment. Thank you for your time, and this is, thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you for the information on offshore wind. I think that there's a lot of variable information that we can now understand better. So, Miguel, are you ready? Go ahead, representing Mexico.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to do a quick review of the energy sector in Mexico, how it has evolved in the last 20 years, and which is our challenge for the next 10 years. As you may know, in 1994, Mexico signed the NAFTA agreement. So for the last 20 years, our power demand has grown almost 100%, 92%. This was a sector that was owned by the state. We have one single company, CFE. They were in charge of producing, distributing, and transmission of energy. So in order to keep this investment rate in the last years, what the government do was to allow the private investors to do joint venture with them to have private producers' energy and also self-producers' energy, companies that produce their own energy. In 2014, the law changed, and then we migrate from a state-owned sector to a free production sector. So anybody who can produce and meet the requirements can build their plant, produce energy, and sell it. The law said that there was a priority of dispatch for renewable energy and the cheaper energy. So this made us grow from 30% of our energy were produced in renewable in 2014. By 2018, we were already on the 27% of our total demand. So it was a very productive change, in the law. However, the transmissions remain to be only by the government, only by CFA. They own the networks, they transmit it, and they do all the distribution. But that's only for them. In 2018, we have a change in government. Now our new government has a more pro-state-owned sector. They want to recover part of the production share that it has been reduced significantly in the last 20 years. And mainly what they are doing is, if they are asking to the private investors, if you want to build a plant, any investment in infrastructure for the power grid that requires to interconnect your plant, it has to be done by the private investor. But remember that the laws say that all transmission lines belongs to the government. So once you build it, those infrastructure, you have to turn over to the government, and now they is owned by the government. So the cost of the project is higher, and the return of investment is longer. So this produce, in the last 3 years, it slowed down the investment. Right? The producer don't want to invest in a power plant because now they have also charged with the transmission and the power grid. This condition in the last 3 years have us two different challenges, but interconnected. The first is power generation. The demand in Mexico grow every year 2 gigawatts, plus 1 gigawatt of all plants that are at the end of the lifetime. So we have to invest in 3 gigawatts per year. That's on to keep with the demands of the country. The other area is power grid, right? According to CFE, only to maintain, and this is key, maintain the grid reliability and flexibility, they have to invest in 6,000 kilometers of new transmission lines, plus do retrofit and revamping for 5,000 kilometers. This is to allow that the new power plants can get interconnected and maintain all the network stable. So, but again, this is just to maintain, not considering the growth. So what are the strategy of CFE? Last year, they decided to invest in 11 power plants. You can see them all across the country. There, in total, they'll generate 6.8 gigawatts. 9 of them are combined cycle. You can see the technologies from Mitsubishi and Siemens. And 2 of them are internal combustion plants, right? All of these projects are belonging to CFE. They are building inside existing CFE plants. So this will be a positive impact to CFE because they can grow productivity, profit, and availability to CFE. So that's part of the government strategy to have a more important role in the sector. The second part of this strategy that we are waiting to come up is how you improve the transmission of energy, right? So what are the opportunities that we have in Mexico in the energy sector? As my colleague commented, according to the Paris Agreement, we have to produce 40% of our energy in renewable energies by 2034. So according to the law, if you build a renewable plant from 2015 from now, anytime you can produce energy, you have a granted dispatch. You can put it on the network. So, but this requires that we have massive investment in the power grids so that the network can cope with the fluctuation that the solar or the wind plants produce, right? You know, we cannot control which sun we are going to have, how strong the wind will be, so there is not always the granted. That's why we need to invest in these power lines. This gives us final numbers for the next 10 years, 42 megawatts of renewable energy, mainly solar, even though we still have many potential in the wind, onshore and offshore, but the solar is the main source of energy for Mexico. The north of Mexico has plenty of areas where we have about 90% of sun in 1 year time frame. The other is that we still require 30 gigawatts of fossil fuel plants that give us the warranty of the network that keep it stable. Obviously, new technology with higher efficiency, with lower emissions, plus 12,000 kilometers of power grid transmission. So that when Mexico is a big country, so that when we have reduced our renewable sources in the south, we can transfer from the north, from east to south, and that the network work properly. So that's the good news. For the next 10 years, we have the power demand. Mexico is growing in power demand. The nearshoring effect from South Asia to Mexico shows that we have and we require the energy. So, and we have the capacity to build it. So right now we guys to coordinate governments, target and objective with private investor target to have it, our solutions to comply with the sector in Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. We understand the Mexican market much better. I'm going to stand up for a second. So we're going to open the floor for questions in case you have any questions. Oh, of course. Is there a microphone that we can? Yes. Thank you, Liz. Just 1 second. Here at the front.
Ok, está por ahí, ¿no? El micrófono no funciona. No, el micrófono aquí del speaker no le...
Yeah.
La persona que va a preguntar no le funciona. Ya.
Good afternoon, everyone. This question is for Ignacio Benedetti.
Go ahead.
Ignacio, you spoke about the social license to operate in your presentation. What is your recommendation to avoid conflict with local communities?
Thank you. Latin America is a very diverse mix of cultures. Each country has their own personal, independent adaptations. So each mining company, each electric company must, in addition to the evaluation of the route standards, the risk management, they need to adapt the implementation into the culture of the company. And it's key factor that they develop a close relationship with key community leaders in each of the remote areas, reinvest into the local community development, and make sure that the environmental licensing and the security are up to standards to facilitate the approval process. But definitely adapting and key relationship with community leaders will be key to success factor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question from the floor? Please go ahead. Please, right there.
Hola Ignacio, yo soy Diego y how do you plan to transition from thermal to cleaner energy considering a substantial amount comes from thermal energy?
Thermal energy, if you see the power generation, is mostly concentrated in Brazil and Mexico. The rest of the Latin American countries are more diverse and heavily investment into hydro and starting to generate into solar and wind. Right now, part of the transition to renewables is going to be part of the power. That's why Mexico is also experiencing investments in gas projects, in cycle combined plants. Nonetheless, there's big investments expected to continue in the future in solar and wind projects. And the big companies already presented the multi-year plans that shows these big investments in solar, wind, and energy networks. Grid networks and transmission lines are going to be big opportunities in the future.
Okay, thank you. And for Luis, what will you do when the wind turbines reach the end of their life? So like with the material, or how do you dispose? Are y'all gonna be recycling that material or?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Excuse me?
Yeah, so when the wind turbines reach the end of their life, right?
Okay.
What do y'all plan to do with that material?
Yeah, this is a nice question for the future. But one of the main issues that we have is for the blades, because the material is very difficult to recycle. But the turbines, we know some companies that they are repowering the turbines. So they made a new devices inside and scrap the original turbine, and they repowering to sell for the emergency countries, also sell to countries like Colombia or Africa, but they are repowering. But the main problems, and I don't have the answer because this is a big doubt for worldwide, is the blaze, because the materials. That's the big issue that we have worldwide.
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you. Any other question for the floor? Yes, sure, please. Here, the front.
Thank you. Question for all, but Luis, since you mentioned wind power, right? So Brazil, right, is leading that, and the governments continue to invest that in like Bahia, Rio Grande do Norte, and you talk about infrastructure. So bring back the conversation into actual what we do, which is logistics, right? So what is Mammoth or any other company that you deal with doing to mitigate the infrastructure situation between ports, road, right? Because right now the emphasis is in land, onshore, but to 2023, Brazil is planning to start bidding on space offshore. So
Yeah, this is also a good question. But this is, I will try to make sure the answer, but because it's a big answer, maybe for sure. And we are working, we as a Mammoth, we are working together in an early stage together with the owners of the projects in order to review together what is the capabilities of the ports in different countries. And we are now working on the designs of the ports in Colombia, even in Brazil, in order to adapt the system port, improve the ports, and make some kind of investment for the owners to prepare for offshore wind. Because offshore wind, as you see in the graphic on the picture, requires a big spaces. But the answer for the question is that we are working in the early stage together with the owners of the parks. That we are doing that right now.
Thank you.
It's clear.
Thank you, Luis. A lot of questions.
Claro.
Anybody else? I have a question for you, Miguel. Do you see us, Mexico, reaching the renewable targets that we have for 2035?
We have the capacity, we have the projects. I mean, in Mexico right now, we have projects that are finished, wind farms and solar farms, but they cannot be connected because we need to do investment on the power grid. But they are ready. So I think, yes, we can comply. And the key element, at the end, this is a market. So, and the market gives what the customer requests. So the key element is that the energy consumers understand the benefits of the long-term benefits of the renewable energy over the short-term benefits of the fossil fuel. That's the key element.
That's a challenge, for sure. So I think we are on time. Is there anybody else that has any last question that wants to make? Well, with that being said, thank you very much to Breakbulk for the invitation, and thank you everybody for staying. I know you want to have lunch, and thank you for your patience. And let's move on.